Okay, let me ask you something. When was the last time Apple looked genuinely uncomfortable during a competitor's laptop announcement? Not mildly annoyed, not corporate PR, we welcome innovation uncomfortable, but the kind of uncomfortable where somewhere inside Cupertino, executives probably sat in a room staring at a giant screen thinking, wait, are they actually serious this time? Because I think that moment may have happened the second Google walked onto the stage and unveiled the Google Book. And yes, I still cannot believe that's the name they went with. The Google Book. A laptop named after something people accidentally open while searching for college textbooks. But here's the thing. The more I looked into this announcement, the more I realized something important. Apple probably isn't laughing as much as people think they are. Because underneath the awkward branding, underneath the glowing light bar, underneath the AI marketing language and the strange mouse wiggle assistant feature, Google may have finally revealed the first real long-term threat to Apple's laptop dominance in years. Not today, not immediately, but eventually. And if you think I'm exaggerating, hear me out. Because this story gets way more interesting once you stop looking at the jokes and start looking at the strategy. The reason this matters so much is because Apple thought they had already won, and honestly, for a while they kind of did. Ever since Apple introduced the M1 MacBook Air back in 2020, the laptop market has basically felt broken in Apple's favor. Windows laptops had better gaming support sometimes, sure. Some had OLED displays. Some had touchscreens. But none of them had the combination Apple suddenly had. Performance, battery life, efficiency, silence, build quality, and ecosystem integration all at the same time. It completely changed expectations for what a laptop could feel like. Before Apple Silicon, people carried chargers everywhere. Fans spun constantly. Battery anxiety was normal. Then Apple dropped the M1, and suddenly people were editing 4K video on battery power while sitting in coffee shops for 15 hours straight. That changed the industry permanently. And then Apple pushed even harder in 2026 with the MacBook Neo. That launch shocked people. Apple making a $599 MacBook already sounded crazy. Apple making a $499 MacBook for students sounded almost impossible. But they did it anyway. Aluminum chassis, Retina display, Apple Intelligence, fanless design, A18 Pro chip, full Mac OS. Suddenly, the biggest argument against Macs disappeared overnight. For years, people said, yeah, Macs are good, but they're too expensive. Apple erased that argument in one keynote, and the reaction was massive. Stores sold out, shipping delays exploded, students started buying Macs who never would have considered them before. Teachers recommended them. Parents justified the extra cost, because now it wasn't even that much extra anymore. Apple didn't just release a cheaper laptop. They attacked the entire Chromebook market directly. And that's why Google reacted so aggressively, because Chromebooks were never supposed to compete with Macs. That was never the business model. Chromebooks existed because they were cheap. Schools bought them because they were affordable, simple, and easy to manage. Nobody bought a Chromebook because it was aspirational. Nobody watched Chromebook reviews dreaming about owning one someday. They bought them because they cost $300 and survived being dropped by children. That was the market. And then Apple suddenly walked into that market carrying a premium laptop experience at a semi-budget price. That is terrifying if you're Google. So what does Google do? They don't try to make a cheaper Chromebook. They don't race Apple to the bottom. Instead, they completely reposition the category. That's what the Google Book really is. It's not just a laptop announcement. It's Google attempting to redefine what a laptop even means in the AI era. And honestly, whether you like Google or not, that is a bold move. Because here's the vision Google is selling. Apple thinks a laptop should be a beautifully optimized tool. Google thinks a laptop should be an intelligent assistant that actively participates in your life. That difference matters. Apple wants the computer to disappear into the background. Google wants the computer constantly interacting with you. Apple's philosophy is calm technology. Google's philosophy is proactive AI. And the Google Book is basically the physical manifestation of that philosophy. Take the magic pointer feature. On paper, it sounds ridiculous. Shake your cursor and Gemini appears. That sounds like a parody of AI integration. And honestly, part of me still thinks it is. But then you look deeper into what Google is trying to do and suddenly it becomes more interesting. The cursor becomes context-aware. Hover near a date and it offers calendar actions. Hover near travel information and it builds itineraries. Hover near photos and it suggests combinations or edits. Google is trying to turn the operating system itself into a live AI layer, constantly aware of what you're doing. Now compare that to Apple. Apple intelligence is good. In some ways, it's more polished. In some ways, it's definitely more private. But Apple still treats AI like a feature. Google treats AI like the operating system itself. That difference is massive. One feels like an assistant you open. The other feels like an assistant always watching. And depending on your perspective, that either sounds revolutionary or horrifying, because this is where the privacy conversation becomes impossible to ignore. Apple has spent years turning privacy into part of its identity. Every Apple keynote talks about on-device processing, secure enclaves, private cloud compute, encrypted data handling. Apple wants users to feel safe. Google wants users to feel assisted. Those are not the same thing. And when Google announces a laptop where Gemini sits at the center of literally everything, people naturally start asking questions. What exactly is Gemini seeing? What data is being processed? What stays local? What goes to the cloud? What gets stored? What gets analyzed? Google's announcement did not answer those questions clearly enough. And I think Apple noticed that immediately. Because if there's one thing Apple understands better than almost anyone, it's timing. Apple knows competitors eventually copy hardware. Displays improve everywhere. Chips improve everywhere. Battery life improves everywhere. But trust is harder to copy. Trust takes years. Apple's entire response to the Google Book probably boils down to one sentence. Users may love AI, but they don't want to feel surveilled. That's Apple's opening. At the same time, though, Apple cannot ignore Google's biggest advantage, and that advantage is Android. This is the part people underestimate. There are billions of Android users globally. Billions. And Apple's ecosystem works best when you own an iPhone. That's the truth. AirDrop is amazing if you have an iPhone. Handoff is amazing if you have an iPhone. Continuity camera is amazing if you have an iPhone. But if you use a Samsung phone with a MacBook, suddenly the experience becomes awkward. Google sees that weakness clearly. The Google Book is designed to become the perfect laptop companion for Android users everywhere. Samsung phones, Pixel phones, OnePlus devices, Xiaomi devices, everything. Files appear instantly, apps sync natively, notifications flow seamlessly. Android apps run directly on the laptop without weird compatibility tricks. That matters especially outside the United States, where Android dominates entire markets. In countries where iPhones are luxury devices and Android owns 90% of the smartphone market, Google suddenly has a very compelling story. And this is where Apple probably gets nervous. Because Apple's ecosystem is incredibly strong, but it's also incredibly closed. That creates loyalty, but it can limit growth. Google's ecosystem is messy, fragmented, chaotic, sometimes inconsistent, but it's also everywhere. If Google manages to create even one genuinely premium laptop experience for Android users, that could become extremely attractive internationally. The challenge is execution. And this is where Apple still has the upper hand by a mile. Apple controls everything: hardware, software, chips, thermals, operating system, retail, support, updates. That consistency matters more than people realize. When you buy a MacBook, you know exactly what you're getting. With the Google Book, nobody even knows what the final products will look like yet because 5 different manufacturers are building them. Acer, HP, Lenovo, Asus, Dell, multiple chips, multiple designs, multiple configurations. That creates flexibility, but it also creates risk. Because premium laptops are hard to make. Really hard. Apple spent decades refining tiny details people barely notice consciously. Hinge feel, trackpad responsiveness, speaker tuning, thermal balancing, palm rest temperature, display calibration, wake from sleep reliability. These things sound small until you use a laptop every day for years. Then suddenly they matter enormously. Google cannot simply announce premium AI laptops and instantly replicate that experience across 5 manufacturers simultaneously. That's not how hardware works. And honestly, I think Apple understands that better than anyone. Somewhere inside Apple Park, executives are probably looking at the Google Book and seeing two completely different realities at the same time. One reality says this is another overhyped Google experiment that will disappear in 3 years. The other reality says this is the first step toward AI native computing becoming mainstream. And the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, because even if the first generation Google Books fail, the idea itself might not. That's important. The laptop industry is changing. For years, laptops became boring because everyone solved the basics: thin, fast, portable, long battery life, good displays. Those became expected. AI is now the new battlefield because companies need a new reason for people to upgrade. Apple knows it. Microsoft knows it. Google definitely knows it. And I think Apple's reaction to the Google Book is not panic, it's acceleration. The existence of the Google Book probably guarantees Apple pushes harder into Apple Intelligence over the next 2 years. Not recklessly, not in the chaotic AI everywhere immediately way Google sometimes operates, but steadily, aggressively, carefully. Apple now has a reason to make AI feel more visible on the Mac. Because one criticism of Apple Intelligence right now is that it almost hides itself too much. It's useful, but subtle. Google is doing the opposite. Google wants AI front and center constantly. And while that can feel overwhelming, it also creates excitement. Investors love it. Tech media loves it. Consumers notice it. Apple's approach is smarter long-term if privacy becomes the deciding factor, but Google's approach is louder, and louder often wins attention first. The funniest part in all of this is that Google and Apple are simultaneously competitors and partners. Google wants the Google Book to compete with MacBooks, while Gemini simultaneously powers parts of Apple's own AI ecosystem. That perfectly summarizes modern tech competition. Everyone is fighting everyone while also depending on everyone. So where does this leave consumers? Honestly, in a surprisingly good position. Real competition is back. For years, Apple basically dominated premium laptops uncontested. Microsoft tried, Dell tried, Samsung tried, but nobody truly changed the conversation. Google might. Not because the first Google Book is guaranteed to succeed, but because Google is pushing a fundamentally different vision of computing. Apple's vision says the best computer is the one that disappears into your workflow. Google's vision says the best computer is the one actively collaborating with you constantly. Minimalism versus intelligence amplification. Calm versus proactive assistance. Those are very different futures. And personally, I think the market is going to split. Some people will absolutely love AI-first laptops, especially younger users already comfortable with AI tools everywhere. They'll love live widgets, contextual assistance, Android integration, instant summaries, AI organization, AI search, AI planning. To them, traditional operating systems may start feeling outdated. Other people will hate it. They'll see it as intrusive, distracting, exhausting. They'll want computers that simply do what they ask without constantly trying to anticipate behavior. Those users will gravitate toward Apple's more restrained philosophy. And honestly, both sides probably have valid arguments, because technology history shows something interesting. The future rarely belongs entirely to one philosophy. Usually the winning products take pieces from both. Apple may eventually become more proactive with AI. Google may eventually become more privacy-focused and restrained. Competition forces convergence. But in May 2026, Apple still has one overwhelming advantage. The MacBook Neo exists right now. You can buy it. You can test it. You can trust the reviews. The Google Book remains a promise. An ambitious promise, but still a promise. And in technology, promises are easy. Shipping great products consistently is the hard part. That's why I think Apple's real reaction to the Google Book probably isn't fear. It's respect mixed with caution. Respect because Google finally identified a meaningful strategic direction instead of just releasing another generic Chromebook. Caution because AI-native computing could absolutely become the next major platform shift if executed correctly. The real battle won't happen in keynote presentations. It won't happen in flashy demos. It won't happen because of glowing bars or AI widgets or marketing slogans. It will happen when real people use these machines every single day for work, school, editing, gaming, communication, travel, productivity, and life. That's where products succeed or fail. Can Google create AI features that genuinely improve workflows instead of interrupting them? Can they solve privacy concerns convincingly enough for mainstream users? Can multiple hardware partners deliver premium consistency? Can Android integration become powerful enough to pull users away from Apple's ecosystem? Those questions matter far more than the initial hype cycle. And Apple has its own questions too. Can Apple continue making AI feel exciting without sacrificing privacy? Can they improve ecosystem flexibility without weakening iPhone loyalty? Can they maintain premium quality while pushing lower price points? Can they evolve the Mac fast enough for a generation increasingly expecting AI everywhere? Those are the real stakes here. Not just one laptop versus another laptop, but two entirely different philosophies about the future of personal computing colliding in real time. And honestly, that's why this moment feels important. For the first time in years, the laptop market feels unpredictable again. Apple disrupted everything with Apple Silicon. Now Google is trying to disrupt the disruption with AI-first laptops. Whether they succeed or fail, they've already forced the conversation forward. Because now everyone has to answer the same question. In 2026, what should a laptop actually be? A beautifully optimized tool? Or an intelligent system constantly working alongside you? Apple and Google clearly have very different answers. And over the next few years, consumers are going to decide which vision they trust more.